Hello again, everybody, and welcome to the Experience Maker Show. We are live on LinkedIn and Twitter. This is Dan Gingiss, Customer Experience Now virtual speaker, consultant, author, and podcaster. And I'm very happy to have you here for lucky episode number 13 of the Experience Maker Show. And today I am very excited to introduce a good friend of mine and fellow Chicagoan, fellow customer experience person, and we always have a lot to chat about. She is the CEO and Chief Experience Investigator of Experience Investigators, and it is Jeannie Walters. How are you, Jeannie?
I'm great, Dan. Thanks for having me.
It is so great to have you here. Always nice to chat with you. And for two people that live in the same city, we don't get to see each other nearly as often as
Very
we'd
true.
like. And usually not in Chicago, right?
I know, right? We usually find each other at other places.
Yeah, it's so funny how that works. There's a couple other of us. I think Andy Crestadina, I've seen exactly once in Chicago, a bunch of times at conferences and stuff. So it's kind of funny how that works out.
It is. It is.
So for those that don't know about you, why don't we start by you telling a little bit about what you do?
Sure. Yeah. I've been focused on customer experience for about 20 years and have a company called Experience Investigators where we specialize in qualitative evaluation and really consulting on journey mapping and understanding customers as well as we possibly can. I do that. I train, I do workshops and speaking all about customer experience. I have a couple courses here on LinkedIn Learning for those of you who are stuck at home and want to get educated about customer experience. And I do a lot of writing and things like that. So that's what I do. A little bit of this, a little bit of that, all about customer experience.
I love how you say for those of you that are stuck at home, which is like pretty much all of us.
I know.
And who isn't interested in customer experience? So I think you're targeting basically the whole world.
I agree. I mean, why wouldn't you be totally invested in this topic?
I can't believe that anybody isn't. But then again,
Right.
we're a little bit biased, and so
Maybe.
that's fair.
Maybe a little bit.
So obviously, you have made the move to virtual presentations, which a lot of us speakers have had to do because our world kind of cratered in around us. How are you finding the reception out in the marketplace to virtual either keynotes or training or workshops, that kind of thing?
What a great question for today, because I have been like crazy this week getting ready for a virtual keynote. And as much as it seems like it would be less work than getting on a plane and going to Boston and getting on stage, it's actually it's a lot of work to really get it right. As far as the reception goes, I've been really fortunate that I've had some long-term client relationships where I've done a lot of that on an ongoing basis for them. And some of that is continuing. I think one of the fears I have, I think, is that we're all getting a little videoed out. And so I think really understanding how to keep people engaged is super important, how to break things up, because it's hard to sit for a long time, screen after screen after screen. So I think we all have to get creative, but that's okay. That's where innovation comes from. And I hope that, as we do more and more virtual events, we will learn more about how can we provide the most value and what do people really need in this environment that's different than when we get on stage. Because, you get a lot of energy from that audience and you play off of the people in the room and you play off of the energy that's there. And that's a lot harder when we're doing virtual. So we just have to get really creative about it.
It's interesting you said that because I was having a conversation on a Facebook Live earlier this week, and we were just doing it for fun. And we ended up talking with my cousin who has worked in the professional wrestling industry for most of his career, not as a wrestler, but as a writer, a photographer. And we were talking about how right now the WWE is still putting on content 3 times a week live in completely empty arenas. And it's fascinating because I've watched just a couple of minutes of it, but what's fascinating is that you see these guys and they're having these matches and there's no fans and there's no signs, and
Mm.
and you can hear the sort of grunts that you wouldn't normally hear on TV because it's so loud. But it got me thinking about how difficult that must be. With it's the same thing,
Mhm.
right? When they make a great move, the crowd cheers and goes wild. They must just feed off of that. And similarly, when we're speaking, we're looking at people's eyes. We can see
Mhm.
reactions. We can see when they're laughing, when they're paying attention. We can see if they're not paying attention, and it is very difficult to do that and just sort of have to guess. I mean, we know our content well enough that we probably know when they're chuckling, but it really sucks not to hear it.
It does. It does. And I was even joking that when I record this keynote, I was going to line up all my kids' old stuffed animals on the couch just so I could have an audience and feel like I was, not in an empty room talking to myself.
I
Because
love that.
you're absolutely right. Like it's we have to have enough faith in what we do to know where things land, but at the same time, there's nothing quite like having that give and take with humans, right? That's what we're kind of missing right now. So
Exactly.
yeah.
I want to say hi to everybody that is listening to our live show right now or watching our live show, and let you know that if you leave comments in the comments field on LinkedIn or on Twitter, we will see them. And if you have any questions for Jeannie, I'd be happy to ask them for you. I see that Frankie Soche is on from Home Depot. Great to see you, Frankie. Frankie, for a long time, hosted a terrific podcast about social media customer service.
Mm.
So, Jeannie, what are you seeing from clients in terms of, obviously everybody is pivoting, no matter what
Mhm.
industry you're in, you're pivoting in some way. What are you seeing in terms of a focus on customer experience? Is it becoming more important, as you and I would probably argue it should be,
Mhm.
or is it being maybe tossed to the side because there's so many other priorities? We gotta do
Yeah.
something else besides that right now.
I wish I had a perfect answer on this, but I hate this answer, but I'm going to say it anyway. It depends, because there are leaders out there who are really understanding that of all times in history right now, we need to show our customers understanding and compassion, and really understand what they're looking for in new ways and in very quick ways. In fact, McKinsey just came out with a report a few days ago, I think, that basically said that the customer demand has changed so much and so quickly that there have been surges in certain industries, like the fresh food meal delivery programs. They saw a 25% surge in just a few weeks in customer demand. So that creates all sorts of issues around, we know what our customers need, but we might not be set up to provide it for them in the way that they expect. Our customer experience might not be able to keep up with this. And so I think if you're not focused on customer experience, you could be caught behind that and really disappoint customers when you had this huge opportunity to pivot in this great way and come out of this in a different way. So I think there are leaders like that who are really focused on that. I think a lot of leaders are looking at this as a customer service, customer support issue, and they're trying to put everything into providing reactive service. And there's a place for that in some industries, but I think we also have to think very proactively right now about how can we look at the journey that our customers are on. Where are the demands that they have right now that they didn't even have 6 weeks ago? What are the concerns they have that they didn't have 6 weeks ago? I've been recommending to my clients that they look at certain customer segments. Who are your customers over the age of 60? Where do they live? That has an impact today. So all of these things, really looking at that, um, that's where I think forward thinking leaders are really going to shine. And there are some who are not going to make it through this because they're thinking very short term, very reactively, instead of really being proactive about what customers need, not just today, but what that will mean long term. People will remember how they're treated right now. And so we have to really look at that.
I couldn't agree with you more on that last piece. And I think that's why it is so important right now that we're focused. And one of the pieces of advice that I've been giving, which is so simple, and it is sort of a basic tenet of customer experience anyway, is put yourself in the customer's shoes.
Mhm.
And we're all at home right now, so it's not very difficult for us to imagine what our customers are going through because they're
Right,
going through the same thing we are.
right.
We're actually in a can't say very unique, a unique time in history in that pretty much everyone, no
Mhm.
matter what your gender, socioeconomic status, religion, sexual orientation, where you live in the world, whatever, everyone's going through the same thing right now. And so we don't have an excuse not to identify with our customers because we know what they're going through. And so
Yeah.
try to think about, well, what are you going through at home and what's difficult and what do you wish was easier, and what could some of the companies that you do business with do to help you make it easier on you and your family. And
Mhm.
that's probably going to start steering you towards the answer of what you and your company could be doing.
Yep.
But it is remarkable how sometimes it's difficult for us to separate our own consumerism from our own customers and what they're experiencing.
I mean, if people were really good at that, we wouldn't have jobs, right? Like,
Good point.
that's really the crux of what this is. It's about the fact that our brains just can't handle two separate truths.
Yep.
And so if we say, well, this is what this is how I feel as a customer, but I'm doing all these great things in my brand. I'm creating all these processes. I know they're going to work. And we're not really taking the time to ask customers. And the other thing about today that I think is really different is, customer experience in the last few years has really been built on data and analytics and measurement. And all of that is super important. But I like to say data is great, but it's always late. It's always about what's happened. And so if we're relying on benchmarks from 6 months ago, that's not going to work right now. And so I think getting real time customer feedback, maybe a little more informal. I mean, heaven forbid, we might actually get some anecdotal data that's important right now. And I know that's making all the data scientists like cringe, but it's important, I think, to reach out in this really authentic human way through social media or through asking your customer support team, what are you hearing? What's really going on? And then reacting to that, because if we're just relying on the data that's always worked, that's not going to work today.
Well, and it's really as easy as just reaching out to your customers,
Hmm.
right? And
Yeah.
pick up the phone and call, or email them, or go onto social media. Especially because we have a lot of employees that are at home right now that maybe aren't at full capacity
Hmm.
because of the just nature of their jobs. It's a little tougher to be at full capacity from home or whatever. Give them a list of customers and have them call.
Yep.
I did that I helped a consulting client do that, and it was remarkable how appreciative people were just to hear from the company.
Yes.
That was a big deal, and so I think that any company can do that.
You're
So
absolutely right.
we have a question from the audience that I want to share with you. Stacy Dolchin, I hope I'm pronouncing your name, Stacy, correctly. She writes in, how does automation and self-service play a role during COVID as customer requests are increasing like
Hmm.
crazy?
Great question, Stacy. Thanks for asking that one. So I like to think of automation. I think we have to really understand where automation fits in the journey. Because, for instance, if I'm going to a grocery store right now and I'm using self checkout and I'm using those kiosks that everybody else has touched, that's a very different experience. And that's going to raise certain levels of anxiety for me that might be different in other automation. So, first of all, I would define what is the goal of the automation. And I think that customers are really open to the right kind of automation, especially if it's personalized, to really make sure that they're being served. So, for instance, if you are in a queue on a phone call and you're trying to wait and it's telling you to wait forever, and it's because you have one question, and maybe your question is, are you going to extend the due date for a bill or something? If you could access that information, if they could provide that to you proactively in that form of automation, that could really help not only you, but also the company figure out how to get through this higher volume of demands and requests. So I think there is great opportunity for automation. I think there's great opportunity for personalization even, and really relying on the tools that we have available, but making sure we really understand where they fit in the customer's journey, not just what they're doing to help our brands get through this, but really how can we do this proactively for the customer? I think that's the biggest question we have to ask about everything right now in customer experience.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. And, a lot of it is just more amplified now than it has been before,
Mhm.
but it is similar to how we always should be treating customers. So my perspective on automation is that I think automation is awesome when it is answering a repetitive question or a question
Mhm.
that frankly somebody could Google, or that's a pretty, straightforward question. Hey, what's the balance on my account, etc.
Right.
I think where automation falls down is when it tries to replace the human, and we really do need that human being to answer. And what is so acute about that right now is that people are craving human interaction. And
Mhm.
so I would not lean immediately towards automation, because I actually think that every opportunity you have to talk to a customer right now, just as we were saying before, it's a research opportunity, it's
Mhm.
an opportunity to connect and gain loyalty, etc. And so I think it's one of these things where we should be looking forward to talking to customers if we can. And my view, anyway, is that the best place for automation is actually to help the agent become a better agent. I
Mhm.
always imagine an agent sitting next to IBM Watson, right? They've got the answer to every question in the
Yep.
world, the best Jeopardy player, they can answer anything, right?
Mhm.
And so now they don't need the three or four screens in front of them and all the sticky notes and the hacks that they've
Yep.
built. All they need is their ability to communicate with another human and let the machine give them all the
Mhm.
answers. That makes them so much better of an agent, and it makes the experience from the consumer's perspective so much better. Because how many of us have called, and then we finally get off of hold and you hear,
Yeah.
you're sitting listening to somebody type a mile a minute to go find
Mhm.
one piece of data, and it's a very strange experience. So that's where I would be focusing automation. What do you think?
I mean, I think in an ideal world, that's true. I think right now that might be challenging. I mean, people are really challenged with staffing right now. They're challenged with getting trained people into the right seats of the bus right now, because as these demands go up, it doesn't necessarily mean that their business operations have gone up. In fact, in many cases, they are limited somewhat. So I would say, I mean, we're kind of saying the same thing here, right? It's all about how can you serve the customer in that moment the best way. And so if they're calling into an agent, I totally agree with what you're saying about the automation on that end of the spectrum, because we have not served our customer support people really well throughout the years with that. And now we have the ability with machine learning and with artificial intelligence and all these amazing tools. There are some really amazing things you can do where it empowers the agent to really respond to the customer in the right way. I think the other part of this is again going back to who is your customer? Like, what are those customer segments and how can they be served in the best way? There will be generations that are more comfortable with getting text messages and getting things through the app and kind of different automated touch points and feel like that's still a very personal experience. There are other segments who won't feel that way. And so it's understanding who your customer is, what they're trying to do, and how you can best serve them.
Yeah, it totally makes sense. And Nick Glimsdale, who's also watching, says the best way I heard it is human is heart and the machine is the mastery. And so
Ooh,
the
I like
point is
that.
automating the routine, which I think is, yeah, it's a
Yes.
nice way to say it.
Yeah.
Um, all right, so let's jump off of COVID for a minute, because let's face it, we're a little exhausted all talking about this. Um, what were you really excited about from a customer experience perspective before all of this happened?
Mm. I am excited about AI, actually. I am excited about the potential of personalizing things in a way that's scalable, with artificial intelligence. And we're not there yet. And anybody who's, had a frustrating chatbot experience will tell you we're so not there yet. But I think that there is tons of potential around that. And I am excited about what that can mean. Because if we can, I mean, we've talked about the customer journey for years, right? We've explored that. We understand it's really important to understand. I think we have to take that a step further and really understand the customer ecosystem. And what you brought up about really identifying with where everybody is in the world right now, we're that's talking about their ecosystem, right? Because it's not about my interaction with the brand as a standalone. It's about how does this fit into my bigger life? And I think when we look at how we can support and empower customers, not just with interactions with our brand, but what our brand could do for them, could help them with their life, could, if we understand their life and their ecosystem more, then we can deliver so much more value. And with the tools available, we can scale those things, which has always been a challenge with humans. And so we then reserve our humans for when they're going to have the best impact, when they're going to be able to provide the most value, and when they're really going to leverage those emotional connections so that customers feel like they're being taken care of. So that's what I'm excited about. I think there is so much potential around that. And I'm really curious right now, as we get through this, what sort of innovations are going to come out of this? What sort of things will happen that will be even more exciting than we're dreaming about right now? I think that's going to be a big part of this.
Yeah, and I think a lot of companies are seeing success in some different places than maybe they've seen before.
Mm-hmm.
And there's one company I work with that's now doing 3 different webinars a week and getting tons of people signing up for them because people are just clamoring for
Yep.
learning and for continuing education and all that. And I think it's the other thing is that we're seeing all of the companies that we do business with react at the same time, and so
Mm-hmm.
we have this ability to compare. And the last time I remember that happening is when the European privacy laws were passed, and we got all these privacy policy emails in our
Yep.
inbox. And I remember writing for Forbes, I did a comparison of like 10 of them, and with the situation that we're in as well now, you could at the very beginning you saw all of these basically check the box emails that were, hey, we're cleaning more and here's the CDC's website.
Yeah.
And awesome, I couldn't find that on my own.
Yep.
But lately we're starting to see, I think, more contextually relevant emails. One that I highlighted in a post recently was from Charles Schwab, who basically sent me all of these investment research tools to handle getting through a volatile market.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, wow, that's brilliant. That's exactly what I want from Charles Schwab right now.
Right.
And I think that, companies need to ask the question of how can you really help? Not like appear to help by sending me to the CDC website that I already know how to get to, but how can you help as it's contextually relevant to my existing relationship with you?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And it's funny because I just wrote a post with some examples like that too. So we're thinking alike, because the idea of exactly what you talked about, like sending these things that are somewhat meaningless to a customer, transitioning into a place where you're sending them something really meaningful is really important. And I talked about how Macy's of all places, they sent out something that said, okay, our shipping is messed up right now, right? Like everybody's struggling with this, so our shipping is delayed. But then the next question that they addressed was, you're probably wondering if we'll be extending the return window, when you want to send something back. Yes, we are. Here's what we're doing. And I was like, that's a great example of putting yourself in the customer's shoes and thinking, okay, what's the next logical concern that somebody might have? How can we address that? How can we make it relevant to them? And I think that there is this mutual compassion right now for what everybody's going through. So customers are more aware that brands are just people. Brands are just big organizations of people. And so instead of having this relationship with a brand, we're now seeing relationships with people. And I think everybody's responding to that in really authentic and human ways, which again, I hope that lasts because I think that, a few months ago, we were talking about how customer demands were getting kind of crazy. And now I think customers are also having patience with brands, but the brands are being really authentic about it, which is how we got there. So I hope that continues.
Yeah, it gets down to this again, this human desire for interaction, which is why staying at home is so hard, right? That we can't be with people. And I do believe, and I believe for a long time that people want that human relationship with the companies that they do business with. And the ones that stand out to us as being examples in whatever industry are generally the ones that have figured out how to create that relationship. And I
Mhm.
love your example of the sort of proactive, anticipatory question,
Yep.
like, heck, and that's what I said earlier on about kind of thinking from the perspective of yourself at home. What
Right.
questions do you have? Well, your
Right.
customers probably have those questions too. Maybe you could answer them before they have to ask you. And there's so many benefits to that because number one, your customer thinks that you understand them and that you're listening to
Mhm.
them. And number two, you might even save yourself a couple of customer service calls by
Absolutely.
getting out in front of something before it happens. So I think that is really smart. And, the few times that that happens to me, it is I mean, even as a customer experience guy, I'll be like, man, it's like
Yeah.
they read it in my mind.
Yeah.
It's a really good experience.
It is. Well, and I think the other part of that is sometimes I'm always blown away when they are answering a question I didn't even know I had, right? Like, once you do this, you might have this. And a couple years ago, we were experimenting with different software collaboration tools and things like that. And there was a feature that we really wanted, and we couldn't find it. So we emailed their service team, and they said, "Oh, we've been working on that for a while. Here's what you can do. Here's a workaround." And about a week later, they sent another email and said, "You know what? We found a better workaround for the integration that you want." And it was one of those integrations that I had kind of mentioned, but I didn't realize how important it was going to be with their software. And they totally anticipated that for me. And so then suddenly it was this moment where I was thinking, oh my gosh, they totally recognize that we had this need. And then the kicker is about 6 months later, they emailed us and said, "Hey, guess what? That feature you asked about 6 months ago is live now. Here you go. Try it out." And I was just like, wow, they really thought about it in a way that it wasn't just kind of saying, which is very common. I think we've all had this where we email about a feature and they say, "Yeah, we're working on that." And then you never hear about it again. And you might catch the announcement when it's launched a few years later, but it's not personal. And so I thought that was great how literally I was thinking, wow, I didn't even know I needed that integration. And then once I saw it, I was like, of course I do. Why wouldn't I? And I would have asked that question in 2 months anyway, but they totally got in front of it and it left such an impression on me.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I always recommend to clients if somebody's given you a suggestion, a product improvement, whatever, even if you don't do it for another year, go
Yeah,
back to all the people that recommended it and suggested it and tell
right.
them each individually that you listened to them and that you made the change. And you're going to absolutely make a customer's day and create long-term loyalty.
I mean, that's the basic definition of closed loop, but
Yeah.
we are notoriously not good at that. Brands are notoriously not good at closing that loop specifically, or the ones who, compliment you but also ask for something. We're really bad at closing that loop too because we've got all these other fires to put out, and it's really easy to just think they're going to be happy when they see it. But I love that recommendation because it really is, it's about making that emotional connection, and it's about letting people know that you've really heard them, which is half of this. Customers just want to feel heard and recognized and seen. And so the more we can do that, the better everybody feels about it.
Absolutely. All right, Jeannie Walter, it's been so much fun to talk to you as always. Tell us how people can get in touch with you. I have been running a little thing on the bottom with your website, but tell
Okay.
us how else to get a hold of you.
Yeah, I'm here on LinkedIn. You can also find my courses at LinkedIn Learning if you look up Jeannie Walters there. And then on Twitter, I'm Jeannie CW, Jeannie with two N's. We're all over. Feel free to reach out. I love hearing from people.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for
Thank
being on the
you.
show today. I really appreciate you taking the time, and I do hope to see you IRL either in Chicago or elsewhere sometime soon.
That
Uh,
would be great.
So thank you so much, and we'll talk again soon. And please join us next week for episode 14, where we're going to have Mike Small, who is the CEO of Sitel Group, and he is going to talk to us about running a contact center and some of the great things that Sitel is doing in and reacting in this area of COVID-19. So really appreciate that you have joined me again today on the Experience Maker. We are here every Thursday at 4 p.m. Eastern. We're live on LinkedIn and on Twitter, and we will see you next week. Thanks again for joining us. My name is Dan Gingiss, and we will see you next week on the Experience Maker Show.